It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps, by the way. Or maybe you're just listening on good old 1430 AM, no matter how you're tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you had a nice 3-day weekend. Hopefully you just had one in general. Very thankful to my bosses here for giving me one because, you know, football season, long, hard season. It was nice to get a little 3-day weekend in there. Got to hang out with my wife a little bit and her family. It was good. It was a fantastic time. Also had time to think about the upcoming NFL draft because we were really not that far away from it. We're only a couple months out. The NFL Combine is not that far away. Going to be hosted right here in Indianapolis. Can't wait for that. It's going to be a blast. Hopefully, I'm going to get to do a show from there. We'll have to wait and see kind of how all of that turns out. But I was thinking about the NFL draft. Who should the Colts take? What does, what do they really need? Right? Because when you look at this Indianapolis Colts roster and you really examine it, there's a lot of good. Like the wide receivers are good. Jonathan Taylor's pretty good. The offensive line's good. The defensive line's pretty solid. The safeties aren't very good, but, we'll get to that here in a moment. Jalen Jones was pretty solid. Juju Brents, when he plays, which isn't very often, has been pretty solid. Samuel Womack was, a pretty good pickup off the waiver wire. Kenny Moore, former Pro Bowler, pretty good player. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of pretty good. There's a lot of solid, but there's no great. And because of that, what I want to see from the Indianapolis Colts in this draft is to go and get somebody great. On Tuesdays, we do this thing here. It's called Top 10 Tuesday. We love alliteration. Alliteration is great. So Top 10 Tuesday for today, I want to highlight the 10 best prospects that the Colts can take, that the Colts can grab with the 14th pick, being the least of the ones I would like, and obviously number one being the one that I would want the most. So at number 10, we have Luther Burden III, fast wide receiver out of Missouri. Now, if the Colts took a wide receiver, I would be slightly annoyed because it would feel like they were giving up on A.D. Mitchell, a guy that they took in the second round, a guy who's only played one season and didn't really get on the field a ton. It would feel like they wasted a second-round pick on a guy that simply did not last. So it would bother me a little bit if they took a wide receiver with the 14th overall pick. If they wanted to take someone, in like the third or fourth round that plays wide receiver, then sure, because there's a lot of good wide receivers in this draft class. With that being said, Luther Burden III can absolutely fly. And I will never get upset with Chris Ballard for taking guys that have like a great trait. Like this Luther kid has just speed. He is an absolute speedster, which is something that the Colts kind of have in Alec Pierce. He feels more like just like a big downfield target, whereas Luther Burden is more of he's just a little more diverse, right? He can run deep, but he can also kind of run routes in the middle of the field if you need him to be. Every year there's a wide receiver that gets, marked as quote unquote the next Tyreek Hill. It'll probably be Luther Burden III. Like that is the guy that I expect to kind of get marked with that title. So if the Colts wanted to take him at 14, I'd be a little annoyed, but I would truthfully understand it. Number 9, Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. Loveland's the best tight end in this draft class that no one is talking about. Everyone's absolutely enamored with Tyler Warren, especially the people here in Indianapolis who saw him play a couple games in the college football playoff, and everyone's like, sign me up. He had great games against SMU, and who else did they beat? Whoever else they beat. I don't even remember, okay? So people love Tyler Warren. Colston Loveland, though, is a really good player. In fact, there are some people, quote, like NFL draft experts, that have him ranked ahead on their big board in front of Tyler Warren. Okay, now they're different. I really think it's just a matter of taste. Tyler Warren is much more like George Kittle, while Colston Loveland's a little more like Travis Kelce, except he can actually kind of block. Okay, Tyler Warren's going to line up. He's going to put his hand in the dirt a lot. He's just a very physical football player, right? When he makes catches downfield, he's just going to kind of box guys out and be like, I'm 6'6", 255. You're not going to catch this football. Whereas Colston Loveland, runs good routes. He's a little more flexible in terms of where he lines up. So they're both good players, just different. It just kind of depends on what you want. Yes, I have Tyler Warren on the list, so I would prefer him over Loveland. But if the Colts were to take Colston Loveland at the 14th pick, I wouldn't be overly upset by it. Number 8, either one of the top 2 quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders and or Cam Ward. Now, it would take an absolute miracle for the Colts to get either one of these guys. That's why I have them so low. They would have to trade a bunch of stuff to grab one of 2 quarterbacks that aren't highly anticipated. It's been talked a lot this offseason and really during the college football season how disappointing this draft class is at quarterback. Like, there just aren't a ton of guys that people are excited about. Now, there is a slight chance that one of these 2 guys fall, especially if Deion Sanders is adamant to some of those teams with higher draft picks that Shedeur Sanders will not play for them. So maybe he falls. We'll see kind of what happens there. And then the question becomes, does Deion Sanders want his kid playing for the Colts? I would say probably not, but then again, who knows? Number 7 on the list in terms of the best players that the Colts could take with the 14th pick. Number 7 is Josh Simmons, offensive tackle from Ohio State. Dude was a beast at Ohio State. Big, athletic, can move. The issue as to why I don't have him higher on the list, because I do think that we'll see the Colts take another offensive lineman at some point in this draft class. The reason why I don't have him higher is because he tore his ACL this year against Oregon. ACL tears aren't as big of a deal as they were a decade ago, but it's still concerning when a 300-pound human has any sort of knee concerns at the young age of only 22 years old. So Josh Simmons, number 7, I think he would be an excellent selection for the Colts, but that injury history is a little concerning. Number 6, Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan, the best corner in this draft class. The reason why Travis Hunter is going to be drafted in front of Will Johnson isn't because he's a better cornerback. It's because of the, diversity that he offers you. He can play offense. He can play defense. He can play corner. He can play slot receiver. He can play, he can play out wide. He can probably play safety as well. He just gives you a lot of options. That's why he's going to go number 2 overall. Whereas Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan, he is a corner straight up. That is the position that he's going to play. The Colts, when you look at, the strengths and weaknesses of the roster, they need help at cornerback. Juju Brents can't stay healthy. Jalen Jones defending an in-breaking route, so a slant, a dig, a 10 and in, anything like that, he's great. But when the route breaks out or when it's just a straight line speed thing, Jalen Jones struggles. Samuel Womack was a waiver wire pickup for a reason. Okay? Will Johnson could honestly be higher on this list. He probably should be, thinking back on it. But the Colts would likely have to make a trade up a pretty decent ways to make this draft pick happen. And we all know Chris Ballard is a bit of a pansy, and he's not going to trade up to do that. Okay, Will Johnson is a good player. Okay, he fits the Chris Ballard mold, which is helping me hold out just like a little bit of hope that the Colts might take him. But the Colts can keep their pick and pick up a good cornerback at 14 or in the second round. That's also why I don't have him higher. But the dude's a stud. He missed 7 games this year. Doesn't matter. He's still cornerback number 1 for a lot of these teams. And as I mentioned, he does fit that Chris Ballard cornerback mold better than some of the other corners in this draft class. He's 6'2". Okay, Chris Ballard likes his cornerbacks big, tall, and long. Will Johnson is that. Okay, but I don't think that Chris Ballard is going to be willing to trade up and grab him, which sucks because I think he's going to play in the NFL for 12 years and be a great corner for all 12 of those years as we continue doing Top 10 Tuesday, the 10 best draft selections that the Colts could make with the 14th pick. Number 5 is another corner, a guy who's a little more realistic. Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. Once again, the Colts need help at corner. I would love to see them take a cornerback in the first round. Okay, Jahdae Barron gives them help at corner immediately. He won the Thorpe Award last year, which is given to the best cornerback in college football. This dude can play. He's physical, pretty good tackler. Part of why Jeremiah Smith, one of the 3 best wide receivers in all of college football, part of why he didn't have a great game against Texas is because this guy followed him around. Now, obviously, they ran bracket coverage. They gave him safety help over the top. They did all of those extra things. But this guy, Jahdae Barron, followed him. The issues with him, and reasons as to why I think the Colts may not take him, he's only 5'11", which is kind of big for a corner. He's 200 pounds, so he's thick. He's got some size to him. He shouldn't get thrown around, but I'm sure Chris Ballard wishes he was a little bit taller. I don't care, though. This goes back to what I really want from the Colts this year. Just draft a good football player that has some sort of history of being a good football player. Okay, part of why the Colts went 8-9 last year is because they took a quarterback that had zero history of being a good quarterback with the number 4 overall pick. Part of why the Tennessee Titans have the number 1 overall pick this year is because 2 years ago in the second round, a guy that they thought that they were going to be able to build their franchise around, and Will Levis, didn't have a history of playing good football. He wasn't that great at Kentucky. Please, Chris Ballard, do yourself a favor and just draft a good football player. Don't really care about their size or anything like that. Just draft a dude who can play. And we've seen it from Jahdae Barron, this cornerback out of Texas. Thorpe Award winner this year. He was all Big 12 in 2023. Okay, so this guy's got a pretty good 2-year track record of playing good, winning football at a place that expects to win. Get winners in the building. That is the thing that you will notice about this list as well. All of these quarterbacks or all these players come from universities, these college football programs that expect to win. Going back to the top, Luther Burden, this wide receiver at Missouri, he won a lot of games at Missouri. Colston Loveland and Will Johnson won a lot of games at Michigan. They won a national title. Okay, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward have both won a lot of games during their time in college. Josh Simmons, offensive tackle at Ohio State, won a lot of games at college. This Jahdae Barron kid won a lot of games at Texas. And this same thing is prevalent throughout the entire list. Draft winning players. Okay, because if you want to change the culture, if you want things to be competitive, you need guys that are competitive and expect to win. Number 4 on the list is Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle from Texas. Okay, big dude. Once again, I fully expect for the Indianapolis Colts to draft an offensive lineman this year because the Colts need some help on the offensive line. They have one truly great offensive lineman. That's Quentin Nelson. And he's not getting any younger. Okay, they need to, at a minimum, add some depth to that room because the Colts didn't have much of that this year. Okay, Matt Gonsalves, the third-round pick out of Pitt last year, fine. He's a rookie, so maybe he gets better, but I'm not really, I'm not betting on this whole developmental thing from the Colts because they haven't really done a great job at developing players in recent years. Just go get a dude that can play right now. That doesn't need to be developed a ton, especially with your first-round pick. And when you look at this Colts offensive line, they have to start building for the future because it's old. Quentin Nelson's 27, 28, somewhere in there. That's kind of old in the NFL. It just is. When you look at the other guys, mainly the tackles, because that's the position that Kelvin Banks plays. Bernard Raymond's 27. That's kind of old. Braden Smith, the right tackle, a guy who missed a lot of time this year due to some personal issues. He's 28. Not great. The Colts have to start shoring up that offensive line at some point. Okay, Kelvin Banks wouldn't be a bad guy to start with. Number 3 on the list, when we look at the 10 best players that the Colts could draft with that number 14 overall pick, Mikael Williams, an edge out of Georgia. And I know what you're thinking. You're just overjoyed at the idea of Chris Ballard drafting another edge rusher. But let's just be honest here, okay? I just want a good football player. I just want a guy who has the potential to actually be great one day, because the Colts don't have any great on their roster. I'm sorry, but they don't. And I know that Colts fans don't want to see Chris Ballard take another edge rusher in the first round. But the Philadelphia Eagles just won a Super Bowl because they had the best pass rush in the NFL. Now, Colts aren't close to that. I am not insinuating that at all. But if Laiatu Latu develops and Mikael Williams is as good as everyone says he is, look, he's the best pass rusher for the Georgia freaking Bulldogs. And usually, if you're the best pass rusher on the best defensive team in football, in college football, usually you pan out pretty well, right? And all those intangibles that scouts talk about with edge rushers, Mikael Williams has. That dude's like 6'6", right? And he's got long arms, and he's fast, and he's twitchy, right? But buzzword right there, right? Then the Colts could be on their way to having a legitimately dominant pass rush in a few years. And maybe by the time they have that pass rush figured out, they'll have figured out who's going to play quarterback for him for longer than 2 years. Jeez. Number 2 for Top 10 Tuesday, highlighting who I think would be the 10 best draft picks for the Colts with the 14th pick. I have Tyler Warren here at number 2. And before you get upset and you're like, why do you have him at number 2? He should be number 1. Let me fully explain. Yes, the Colts desperately need a tight end. No matter who's playing quarterback for the Colts next year, they need a player who can consistently create mismatches, right? That's what Tyler Warren does. It's the whole too big for defensive backs, too athletic for linebackers thing, right? Well, he's too big for linebackers too. Like, the dude's just a physical freak. And he's a physical guy, right? So he should be an average blocker at a minimum. I think he'll be a little bit better than that, just going back and watching him play at Penn State. He seems like the obvious selection for the Colts right here. Okay, most people have him as their tight end 1 for this season. I think everyone here in Indianapolis, you included, would probably like to see Tyler Warren play here. I want him because he's physical, and that sets a real tone. Like, physicality and toughness is just not something that the Colts have had during their time. Like, they haven't. Okay, and the Colts could find a guy who kind of sets that tone in the first round right here with taking Tyler Warren. The reason, though, why I don't have him number 1 is because this is just a deep tight end class. Like, the Colts could undoubtedly draft a good tight end in the second round who could wind up being every bit as good as Tyler Warren. Okay, that is why I have him at number 2, and why I have Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia, why I have him number 1. He's the best safety in the NFL draft. And you could make an argument he's the best player, period, in the NFL draft. Say, well, Jonathan, if he's the best player in the NFL draft, why is he why would he be available at 14? It's because he plays safety. And that's just not a premium position. But the Colts desperately need a safety. Like, they need one. Julian Blackmon needs to be gone. He needs to be gone. Okay, and Starks fills that safety role immediately. And he's flexible. He can do more than just play safety. Okay, he can cover. He's bigger. He can come up and stop the run. If you need him to play like nickel corner, like the position that Kenny Moore plays, he can do that. He is versatile. He can do whatever you need him to do on the back end of your defense. He can come down into the box and help support stopping the run, which the Colts also kind of need. Okay? And, when's the last time that the Colts had a defensive player that you felt comfortable putting in every situation? Seriously. Even some of the all-time greats, even the Hall of Famers on this Colts defense. Did you feel great about Dwight Freeney's run defense? Probably not. You felt good about it because he was a great player, but you didn't feel great about it. Okay. Like, I think the last time the Colts had a player that they could kind of move all over the field was Bob Sanders. And he was awesome. The issue is he was my size, except just like a little more muscular than I am. And he could play everywhere. And he just made all these plays left and right. Like that is the kind of guy that Malachi Starks could be. So I think the Colts should take him with the 14th overall pick because I really just want them to take a great player. That's all that I want from them. Just take a great player. Speaking of great players, Indiana doesn't have any of those. It'd be really nice if they did, but they don't. And because they don't have any great players, because McKenzie Mbako hasn't gotten any better, they continue to drop these close games. And part of it is a talent thing, but there's another thing that sticks out like a sore thumb when you watch this Indiana team play basketball. It drives me crazy, and it's a large part of why they have lost some of these close games. And I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. It's a big show today. Jared Dubin coming up at 11:20. We're going to talk a little bit about All-Star Weekend. I have my thoughts on the NBA All-Star events, coming up here in like 15 minutes or so. Before we get to that, Indiana loses another game. And, all their losses kind of seem to be for the same reason. It's because they're just a poor shooting team. Like, why Indiana is taking 29 threes is beyond me. Seriously, like, why is this team that shoots the basketball so terribly shooting 29 threes, especially when they aren't making them? And then to make it worse, and the reason why they lost this game, and the reason why they've lost multiple games this year, is because they allowed their opponent to shoot 45% from three. Like, come on. If you aren't going to make threes, then you better be able to defend the three-point line, which is something Indiana hasn't done this year. Not consistently, at least. In Indiana's games this year in the Big Ten, they've played 6 games in which they allowed their opponent to shoot 40% or better from three. They have lost all 6 of those games. In 5 of those 6 games, their opponents shot 45% or better from three. You aren't winning any of those games, especially when you're as poor of a shooting team as Indiana. Like they have one guy in Luke Goody that when he shoots a three, I'm like kind of hopeful that it goes in. Whenever anyone else shoots it, I have no expectation for the basketball to go in. This team simply cannot shoot the ball, which is okay. I see teams shoot poorly from three and win all the time. Happens all the time in college basketball. Michigan State's the worst three-point shooting team in the conference, and they're 11-3 in the Big Ten. You know what else they do and why they're able to win these games despite not shooting the basketball very well? They defend the three-point shot better than any other team in the conference. Like, you can afford to shoot 29% from three on the season when you allow your opponents to also only shoot 29% from three on the season. Okay, if you can't defend the three, then you better be able, if you can't make the three, then you better be able to defend it. Because if you can't, then you're going to lose a lot of games. And that's why Indiana lost on Friday night. They simply couldn't defend the three. This 2-3 zone magic that worked against, Michigan and Michigan State did not work against UCLA. Here is Mike Woodson after the game discussing the 2-3 zone that did not work in that loss to UCLA.
Well, I mean, again, I thought, there were times it didn't help. We just didn't play it right, and they exposed us some early on, and we got away from it. I thought our rotations tonight were off based on how we played it at Michigan State. And then too, they had big time shooters around the horn. So you got to pick and choose when you're playing teams that can shoot the ball from the perimeter when you're zoning up.
Mike Woodson right there talking about the 2-3 zone that did not work. And he mentioned it right there at the end. When you're playing teams that can actually shoot the basketball like UCLA can, they went into that game against Indiana shooting about 35% from three on the year as a team, which is a pretty good number. It's a little tougher to play zone. It just is. It's a little tougher than when you're playing against Michigan State, who shot like 17% from three in that game. Either way, whether you're running a zone or you're running, man-to-man, whatever it is, you cannot allow your opponent to shoot 45% from three. That's simply too bad of defense to expect to beat anybody. Okay? Like, you can't defend that poorly and expect to win. After the game, Mike Woodson was asked why this team can't seem to win close games. We have Over the Hump Day on Wednesdays in honor of Mike Woodson's teams, and not even just this year, but really his entire 4 years, and even going back to his time in the NBA. Like, we have Over the Hump Day to honor the fact that Mike Woodson is constantly working to get his teams over the hump. And he was asked this question, and at the end of the statement, I think he kind of sums up what we're going to remember about this season for Indiana. Here's Mike Woodson after the loss against UCLA talking about why this team just can't seem to get over the frickin' hump.
I wish I had the answer. I go back to the Northwestern game, the Maryland game, Purdue game, Michigan game. We all winnable games. And, if you win one or two of them, you're feeling good about yourself when you're in close games. And 9 out of 10 times you make the plays that you need to make. The fact that we've lost them, it's been guys are searching. I'm searching as the coach, in terms of trying to get them over the finish line. And, I'll never put it on the player. I take the responsibility. Even though I don't make the shots or miss the defensive assignments, it's still my job to get them over the hump.
That was Mike Woodson right there talking about why this team can't seem to close out some of these games. And, I love Mike Woodson there at the end, just being like, I always take responsibility, but these guys aren't making shots and they aren't playing very good defense, but it's on me. I love that. Anytime someone gives a but, like they make a statement, it's like, it was my fault, but oh, so it wasn't your fault. That's what you're about to say. That's what Mike Woodson just did. Anyway, we're going to look back on this Indiana season and just think about all these what ifs. I'll probably do like a full 8 minutes on this at some point later in the season. But like seriously, like what if they'd won half of these close games? Like what if they'd beaten, just like Northwestern and Purdue and Michigan? How differently would we perceive this team? Would Mike Woodson still have a job? Seriously, because like if they win those, then they're probably in pretty good shape to make the NCAA tournament. And then it's like, could they have like won a game or two? Get the right matchup, maybe. Like they've just been so close in all of these big games. Yet Mike Woodson just hasn't been able to get them over the hump. And yeah, I think this is going to be a year that we look back on and be like, man, like what if they just won like half of these? How different could things have been? And the answer is pretty different. Anyway, Purdue, they've now lost 2 games in a row, which now means that the worlds of Boilermaker fans everywhere are just falling apart. And I don't really know why. We've known the weakness of Purdue really from the start of the season. They are small. They do not have a lot of size. And they just lost to 2 teams in Michigan and Wisconsin who are bigger than they are. Michigan played 2 7-footers together. Purdue's 2 best bigs fouled out. Wisconsin has these 2 7-footers that are very skilled and could play together, but Wisconsin didn't play them together all that much in that game. Okay, they can both step out and knock down the 3-point shot, and Purdue's just going to struggle with teams that are larger than them. Okay, they're also going to struggle with teams when players like John Tonji go 10 for 15 and score 32 points. And this is the other thing about Purdue that I haven't really been able to talk about too much because we just hadn't seen it enough. But Purdue doesn't have players to really match up with guys like that. It's why Mackenzie Mbako had such a great game against them in West Lafayette. Like Purdue just doesn't have anybody to deal with these big wings / big guards. Well, they do. They have one guy, and his name's Camden Heide. The issue is he's been bad. He's not quite a 0 offensively, but he's pretty close. After shooting 45% from 3 last year, to be fair, not very many attempts, he's at 29% this year. Purdue's offense is already hard enough because they really only have 2 guys that can score, and Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Wren. We'll get to Braden Smith here in a second because he wasn't very good. And Caleb First basically always has to be on the floor, and he's not really an offensive threat. But he has to be out there for defensive purposes. Like he has to play center. He has to anchor the defense. And which makes it hard to play Camden Heide because it's hard to overcome having 2 players on the floor who are zeros offensively. So Camden Heide can't really play. And even when he does play, like he hadn't been very good this year. The other issue that Purdue ran into against Wisconsin, and part of why I was very wary about this game for Purdue, is because Wisconsin just put a ton of size on Braden Smith. It's just like here's a 6'4" guard. Okay, he's tired. Let's bring him out. Here's a 6'5" guard. Good luck, Braden Smith. And he struggled. 2 of 10 shooting, only scored 6 points. The 12 assists were great, but when Matt Painter came on Dan Dockage's show, which you can listen to right here on the station from noon to 3, like when he came on his show, he talked about how Braden Smith has to be a scorer. He has to score to beat the better teams in the country. And Wisconsin just did an excellent job of putting size on him and making it tough on him. And he struggled to score in part because of that. Great. He had 12 assists. Not good enough. Good news, though, for Purdue is Purdue can prevent these 2 losses from becoming a losing streak tonight. When they play at Michigan State, if I had to bet, Purdue's probably going to play some sort of 2-3 zone because, Michigan State's not exactly a small basketball team. They've got some size to them. Not quite as big as Wisconsin, especially in the backcourt. Their guys are more like 6'2" as opposed to 6'4", 6'5". But we'll kind of see what they do. Also, Michigan State cannot shoot the basketball, so run that 2-3 zone. The other thing about this game and what's going to dictate whether or not Purdue wins or not is going to be how Braden Smith plays. Because Trey Coffin-Wren is a guaranteed 20 points a night right now. He's at 20 or more in 7 of his last 8 games. He had 30 against Wisconsin. The one game he didn't score 20 points was against Michigan, and it's because they beat Michigan by 27, and he didn't play as many minutes as he normally would have. Okay, so he is solid and steady. Braden Smith just has to pick up. He has to do his part. He has to score the basketball. And maybe it's unfair of me to expect for Braden Smith to score 20 points a night and dish out at a minimum 6 assists, but he's, proclaimed as the best point guard in the country. Go get 20 and 6. Okay? We know about his ability to get other players involved. Purdue has to get him to score, though. Okay, they're 4.5-point underdogs in this game. The only way they're winning this game, unless obviously a role player goes off, if CJ Cox comes out and scores 15 points, then, the game's going to change. But the only way they're beating Michigan State is if Braden Smith can find a way to consistently score the basketball. Now, it should be a little bit easier because as I mentioned, Michigan State's just not as big as Wisconsin is at the guard spot, but they're still very talented. And Purdue goes as Braden Smith goes. I think he goes well tonight. He just doesn't have back-to-back bad games. I don't expect him to shoot 2 of 10 from the floor again. So I'm going to take Purdue to win tonight on the road in East Lansing. Coach Izzo is going to be on the Dan Dockett Show today at 12:30. You don't want to miss that. You also don't want to miss my guy, Jared Dubin, coming up at 11:20 to talk All-Star Game, which was terrible. The All-Star Game was awful, pitiful, lack of effort. It was just bad. No way around it. And I'm going to tell you why it was bad. And, welcome to National Fix the NBA All-Star Game. We celebrate this the Tuesday after President's Day every single year. I'm not going to tell you how to fix the All-Star Game, but I am going to tell you how to fix the NBA and how that will in turn also fix the All-Star Game. I've got that for you when we come back here in about 3 minutes.
Unfiltered takes live here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice day. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Jared Dubin coming up at 11:20. Can't wait to have him on. He always does a great job, whether we're talking NFL or NBA. We're talking NBA today because the All-Star game stunk, which is not surprising. As a big NBA fan in general, I watched I watched everything. I did. I watched the All-Star game. I watched the dunk contest. I watched it all. And it was nothing short of awful. The 3-point contest was underwhelming. Mac McClung, a G Leaguer, won the dunk contest for the third year in a row. Okay. The people who went on Twitter after the dunk contest and said that he's not an NBA player are correct. Like he's not. Okay. And you say, well, Jonathan, why do you say that? He's on a 2-way contract. When you've made more money off of winning the dunk contest than you've made playing in the NBA for like 4 or 5 years, then you're not an NBA player. Sorry, but you're not. The most interesting thing from those Saturday night events, even though, Mac McClung jumping over a car was pretty sick. The most interesting thing from those Saturday night events was Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul getting disqualified during the skills challenge for purposefully missing all of their shots. Okay, like that's problematic, okay? And I'm not going to talk about the former lore of the dunk contest or anything like that, because when you compare reality and nostalgia always wins because no one ever really seems to remember the bad parts. With that being said, the problem only grew on Sunday night when the actual All-Star game happened. LeBron James announces an hour before the game that he's not playing. Anthony Edwards, he didn't play either. And that wasn't the worst part of it. The All-Star game was 3 hours long. They played basketball for 32 minutes of those 3 hours. The other 2 hours and 28 minutes were filled with commercials and Mr. Beast's awkwardness of having a fan from the crowd hit a logo 3 for $100,000. And it was weird because Damian Lillard clearly wanted the kid to make the shot, but for some reason, Mr. Beast didn't want for the kid to make the shot. It was weird. It felt like I was watching QVC with commercial length basketball games in between the products being shown. Okay. 3 or 4 different artists performed between a couple of the games. And it was artists I'd never really even heard before. Kevin Hart told several terrible jokes. They honored the inside the NBA guys, even though they're going to be there. They'll just be with ESPN next year, not TNT. And when that wasn't happening, Draymond Green, current NBA player, was just ripping this new All-Star format. Listen to Draymond Green talk about the new All-Star format.
You work all year to be an all-star, and you get to play up to 40, and then you're done. This is so unfair to Victor Wembanyama, who just took this game really seriously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who just took this game really seriously. When you talk about chasing after the points records, Melo and Kobe and all these guys who've had great scoring nights, they don't get the opportunity to do that with this game. Also, we can watch some rising stars. We're about to watch the Olympic team. Now we get the treat of watching the Olympic team play against a U19 team. Come on, what are we doing? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, Kenny's team is done, by the way. Chuck won. Kenny's team was one that's eliminated.
Yes.
Yeah, so SGA still in it, Victor in it. But you're talking about the scoring records that we've heard. Tatum leading all scores, 55 a few years ago. It's harder to catch now.
They can't do that. They don't get to etch their name in the history books. It's the reason you get an all-star, Kobe Bryant all-star MVP award.
Scale of 1 to 10, your thoughts of the format?
10 being the best.
Yes.
A 0. Sucks. Say basketball.
Draymond Green, very vocal. I love Don't Connect after the game. Just being like, it's Draymond Green. He's just talking, which is so funny. And Draymond Green is wrong about this. Okay, Charles Barkley, what he said was exactly right. He was like, Draymond, it's your generation of players that have caused this to happen because you guys don't take it seriously. I liked watching the Rising Stars play in that game because the game was actually competitive. It forced Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and the rest of those all-stars on that team to actually play hard because they couldn't allow for these young guys to beat them. That was the most entertaining game of the three played. The game was like 15 minutes. It was the best 15 minutes of that 3-hour period. And the reason why it was the best was because the game was actually competitive. The guys like actually played hard. It was great. It was nice to see. The other two games that were played, nowhere near as competitive as that one. The championship game lacked effort with the exception of Victor Wembanyama, and I'm really hoping that he kind of leads the charge into the All-Star game being good again. We'll see. His comments after the game of being like, it was nice to learn that you can actually play this game really hard. Okay? And then, between the second game and the championship game, there was like an hour-long break. Not really, but that's just what it felt like. Like the construction of the event was terrible. There was too much clutter and not enough basketball. Like, believe it or not, NBA, when I tune in to watch the NBA All-Star game, like, I would like to watch basketball. I would. Like that is what I want to see. And while all of that's going on, while I'm over here feeling like I'm watching QVC with all the advertisements and clutter and all that crap, the NHL is just putting on the All-Star weekend of forever. Like, it was incredible, right? They unleashed this Four Nations idea for their All-Star celebration, and it was a huge hit. If you're unfamiliar, every player played for his home country. So they had like Switzerland, Finland, Canada, and the United States, and they played real hockey games. Okay? And in the USA versus Canada game, there were 3 fights in the first 9 seconds. It was great. The games were competitive. The championship game of the Four Nations, it's on Thursday night. And guess what? It is appointment TV for me because it's the United States against Canada again. And the game's going to be awesome to watch. And as I realized this last night, I asked myself a very simple question of why? Like, why do I want to sit down and watch this, but not the All-Star game? And the answer is because I have a genuine rooting interest. That is what the NBA, not just All-Star weekend, but that's what the NBA is missing. Every American, Canadian, Scandinavian, is that what the people in Switzerland are called? And the people from Finland, they're all genuinely interested because people like to root for their country. People don't watch track and field events all year. But when the Olympics show up and we slap that, amazing United States flag on people's chests, everyone is invested. Okay? It is in everyone's blood around the globe to root for your country. Okay, and when people have a rooting interest, they tune in. And I'll prove it to you. Do you remember when Peyton Manning missed an entire season for the Colts and they ended up going, 1-15? I'll bet that you watched most of, if not all of, those games because they're your team. Okay, and for whatever reason, you root for them. You have a genuine rooting interest. And that's why people tuned in to, Four Nations. And it's why people don't watch the NBA anymore. It's why free agency and trades are more popular in the NBA than the actual games. Few people are fans of a legitimate NBA team. In fact, they're actually fans of players. Okay, there are plenty of people out there who aren't Laker fans. They just root for the Lakers because LeBron James plays for them. They are LeBron James fans. So when he doesn't play, when it's, Tuesday night in March and he doesn't play, those fans do not watch. It's why their ratings are down, or it's part of why their ratings are down. The NBA has to find a way to create a rooting interest once again. They need people to be fans of a specific team as opposed to a specific player. Okay, and that starts with taking power away from the players and doing what they can to keep players in one place for a long time. I know that players in the NFL hate the franchise tag and all the tools that the NFL has to kind of keep players in one spot, but it's the best thing for the NFL. And ultimately, that's what matters. The health of the league should be more important than everything else. So, like, for me, and why I think it's important to keep NBA players in one place for a long time is because of my own personal experience. I grew up in two places where there is no NBA team. Okay? I am a Mavericks fan because my favorite player growing up played for the Mavericks for 20 years. Okay? Dirk Nowitzki, the best shooting big man ever. Okay? And the reason why I'm a Mavericks fan is because of him. He was there for 20 years. So because of that, for 20 years, I rooted for the Mavs. And now that he's gone, like my loyalty is just there and it's not going to leave because I have too many memories of watching sports or watching basketball and like core memories being centered around the Mavericks. I'm sure that there are a lot of Spurs fans my age that are Spurs fans because Tim Duncan played for the Spurs for 20 years. I'm sure there's people a little bit older than me that are Spurs fans because the Admiral played for the Spurs for a long time. I'm sure that there are people that are Bulls fans that never have lived in Chicago because they just grew up rooting for Michael Jordan because of everything that happened during that time. Like you became attached to the Bulls. So now you're a suffering Bulls fan waiting for them to kind of not be 500 anymore. Okay. And there are Celtics and Laker fans out there because of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, because they spent their entire careers there. I would be willing to bet that if LeBron James had never left Cleveland, and if he'd started his career there, and if he was still there to this day, then when he eventually retires, because it's going to happen at some point, that the people who grew up watching LeBron James would be Cleveland Cavalier fans for the rest of their lives, because that is how fandom works. Something draws you to that team. And if that thing that draws you in is there long enough, then you don't leave. Maybe you live somewhere for a certain amount of time. Maybe you're like, you might be a Colts fan because you grew up in Indianapolis. And maybe because of that, you're also a Pacers fan. Okay, like my boss grew up in Tampa Bay. It doesn't matter where he lives now. He will always be a Buccaneers, Lightning, and Rays fan. I have my own teams that I'm genuinely interested in. It's because growing up, like they had players that I liked, and because of that, like I'll always be a fan of those teams. My older brother, okay, my older brother and I grew up 30 minutes from Nissan Stadium, where the freaking Titans play. My older brother is a Colts fan because he grew up loving Peyton Manning and he watched him for, I believe, the 14 years that he played in Indianapolis. And because he was so invested in Peyton Manning, he is still a Colts fan. Okay? So when I look at the NBA, like you have to give fans something to tie to. Okay? And look, maybe that's a player, maybe that's a coach, whatever it is. Like they have to keep those guys there for a long time. Okay? And if you do that and people become fans of teams and not players, your general viewership on a nightly basis will go up. And if general viewership goes up, then your all-star weekend viewership should go up as well, just because you'll have garnered more interest from people. Okay, you have to get people to be fans of teams, not players. And until the NBA can figure out how to do that, they're going to continue to struggle with ratings for the regular season and all-star weekend. Okay? Speaking of players and all-star weekend, LeBron James is getting a ton of blame right now. I don't get it. I really don't. Like, part of me does. But there's a certain aspect of people being upset at LeBron James for not playing in the All-Star game that makes no sense to me. I find it kind of stupid. I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith. If you want to follow me there, you can also follow the station at Ticket 1430. Just to stay up to date with both my show and the Dan Dockett Show, which is live today from noon to 3. Coach Tom Izzo at 12:30. Todd Leary coming up at 1 o'clock. Jared Dubin coming up here on my show here in about 20 minutes. You can also listen via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps, or you can just listen on 1430 AM. No matter how you listen, I think it's a great way to pay attention. So last thing here on the All-Star game and just All-Star weekend and everything that went on with it. LeBron James, like people getting upset with LeBron James for not playing. There's parts of it that I understand. There's a specific part of it, though, that I don't understand. You know, there was a photo posted this weekend of Michael Jordan. And he's 42 years old after the All-Star game. He's got like ice bags on his knees. And he played. I believe this was the 2003 All-Star game. That sounds right. And he's 42 years old. And he played. And he played hard. And he did all those things. So the excuse of LeBron James not playing in the All-Star game because he's 40 it's invalid because of what Michael Jordan did. Okay? The idea that, you know, I find it selfish of him to have not announced this injury sooner, because the reason why he waited was so that All-Star accolade would be on his resume for forever, which I find dumb, because like when real people talk basketball and they talk about, you know, the legacy thing, like I don't care about All-Star appearances. I'm sorry. I care about all NBAs, because if you're all NBA, that means you were, you know, one of the 2 or 3 best players at your position for the entire season. Okay, not just for the first 48 games or however many games they play before the All-Star break. Okay, so I understand that. The thing that I don't get, though, is like, yes, LeBron James didn't play, but neither did Anthony Edwards. And no one is upset at Anthony Edwards, a guy who's 24, a guy in his mid-20s. No one's upset at him for not playing. They're only upset at LeBron James, which I just find incredibly funny. Okay? And the reason why the All-Star game has fallen off isn't because of LeBron James either. Okay? He wasn't the only one lackadaisically playing for the last 20 years. Okay? It was all of them. It was all of them. It was Draymond Green the 4 times that he made the All-Star team. It was Steph Curry, even though watching him pull up from, you know, half court was pretty sick. Okay? So like he's not why the All-Star game has fallen off. Okay? And he's not the only guy who didn't, you know, tell people about his injury until the All-Star game was actually about to happen. Anthony Edwards did the exact same thing. The only reason why people are upset with LeBron James is because he's polarizing as all get out. Everyone has an incredibly strong opinion on him, and the people that don't like him want to find every excuse possible to not like him even more. Okay? So, I don't know. Like, if you want to criticize LeBron James for it, go right ahead. I get it. But, like, maybe also criticize Anthony Edwards. That way your bias isn't showing. So, we'll see. News came out yesterday that the NBA is reportedly looking into adding a one-on-one tournament into the All-Star game. I would think that that's awesome. I would genuinely rather them have a one-on-one tournament than an actual All-Star game. That would be, for me, so much more entertaining. Okay, like, let's just take those guys. There's 24 of them, 30 of them next year because they're expanding the rosters to 30 or to 15 apiece. And if they do that, then, like, let's just do, like, a 30-team bracket. And whoever gets the most votes, however many that would be, they get a first-round bye. I think that would be a much more entertaining thing than an actual All-Star game. Jared Dubin is set to join me here in about 15 minutes or so, and when he does, we'll get into all of that. With that being said, Indiana just can't seem to win close games. They're just not a very good basketball team. Or I don't even know. Like, are they good? You know, they're an inconsistent basketball team. That's what they are. You know, they beat bad teams consistently. They've got the one win over Michigan State. That's really it. Speaking of Michigan State, Tom Izzo is set to join the Dan Docker show today at 12:30. Why Indiana took 29 threes in that game, I'll never know. Why they're allowing their opponents to shoot 45% from three in a game, I have no idea. Doesn't make any sense. Mick Cronin just kind of walked in here. He was like, hey, you guys should probably hire me. And then he left. He's like, I'm going to go back to sunny California for, the next few months. Bloomington, if you want me, call me. Okay. And here's my, I don't want to say biggest thing, but when I talk about whoever's going to be the next head coach at Indiana, I just want them to have an understanding of how basketball has changed. Like, Nate Oates would be a great hire. Okay. Like, you could, he's one of the best coaches in college basketball. Okay. He is. And the reason why he's one of the best coaches in college basketball is because, like, he understands how basketball has changed. I'll look at discourse on Twitter or Reddit or whatever about the NBA, and I will see people say things like, the NBA has solved basketball with the way that they play, with the way that they move the ball, with the way that they generate shots from the outside. Three's worth more than two. Layups are easier than mid-range jump shots. If you're going to take a jump shot from 17 feet, why not just take a step back and have it be worth more? Okay, like that is what the NBA has become. And people have said that they've solved basketball. If basketball is solved, then why aren't these college coaches implementing the same strategy? That's what Nate Oates has done. And Nate Oates has won everywhere that he's gone. And so, look, he's not leaving Alabama. He's not. Okay? It'd be great if he did, but he turned down the Kentucky job. And the Kentucky job and the Indiana job, I think, are in the same realm of really good job in college basketball. If he's not going to Kentucky, like, he's not coming to Indiana. So I say all that to say, whoever Indiana decides to hire next as their head coach, I want them to understand kind of where basketball is moving and the importance of not only your own three-point shot, but defending the three-point shot. Because even if you don't make threes, like, you can win basketball games. Okay, like, Indiana is not a good three-point shooting team, but they're a better shooting team than Michigan State. The difference is Michigan State actually, like, limits their opponent's ability to make three, so it doesn't matter how poorly they themselves shoot it. Indiana doesn't do that. During their Big Ten schedule this year, 6 teams in the Big Ten against Indiana have shot 40% or better from three against IU. Indiana has lost all 6 of those games. And 5 of those 6 games, they allowed their opponent to shoot 45% or better from three. Indiana is not a good shooting team. They're not. We knew this before the year started. It was my biggest gripe with this roster. They have one guy who, when he shoots the ball, I have, like, some small amount of hope that's going to go in. That's Luke Goody. Whenever anyone else shoots, I'm just like, it's probably not going to go in. Like, when Miles Rice pulls up for three, it's like, yeah, that's probably not going in. That is my reaction when most of these guys shoot the basketball, with the exception of Luke Goody. Okay, but you can win games if you don't shoot well. Michigan State, the worst three-point shooting team in the conference, is 11-3 in Big Ten play. Do you know why? It's because they defend the three-point line better than anyone else in the conference. Okay? That's the reality of it. If you don't make threes, then you better make sure that your opponent doesn't either. Okay, Mike Woodson, this 2-3 zone, it's like the new fad of the IU fan base. Ooh, zone. We should play more zone. Hey, that zone against Michigan State, the worst three-point shooting team in the conference, worked pretty well. Let's see if it works against UCLA, who shoots a much higher percentage from three. Newsflash, it did not work. UCLA shot 45% from three. Here's Mike Woodson after the game discussing why the 2-3 zone did not work.
Well, I mean, again, I thought, there were times it didn't help. We just didn't play it right. And they exposed us some early on, and we got away from it. I thought our rotations tonight were off based on how we played it at Michigan State. And then, too, they had big-time shooters around the horn. So, you got to pick and choose when you're playing teams that can shoot the ball from the perimeter when you're zoning up.
Mike Woodson, right there, talking about his patented 2-3 zone. What a smart guy. So smart. Hey, you can't run zone against teams that shoot the ball well. Really, Mike? Who would have thought? Just to kind of piggyback off of that just breathtaking analysis from Indiana head basketball coach Mike Woodson. Yeah, it's a little tougher to run zone when you're playing a team that shoots it, not at 29% on the year like Michigan State did going into that game against IU. Either way, even if you are running a zone, maybe don't let them shoot 45% from three. Maybe if they're making all these threes, you don't play zone. What a thought. That's called an adjustment. Okay, like Indiana just didn't defend well enough to win that game. And, this is another close loss. And like everyone always pays attention to the end of games and like end of game execution and all that kind of stuff, which is, not an incorrect thing to do. But there's always way too much weight, I think, put into it. I just think that like a 2-minute stretch and, in the final 2 minutes is just as important as a 2-minute stretch with 12 minutes left to go in the first half. Okay, like they impact the game the same. And like maybe if you play better in like a 4-minute stretch earlier in the game, it's not close late. And that has consistently kind of been my takeaway with Indiana. It's like if you just don't allow them to make all these threes earlier in the game, then the game isn't close late. You're up by 8 and you can just kind of cruise. Not cruise, but you see what I'm saying. And after the game, Mike Woodson, he was asked about why they've lost all of these close games. And his answer, pretty much what you would expect from Mike Woodson. Here he is talking about why they can't seem to win any close game.
I wish I had the answer. I go back to the Northwestern game, the Maryland game, Purdue game, Michigan game. We all winnable games. And, if you win one or two of them, you're feeling good about yourself when you're in close games. And 9 out of 10 times you make the plays that you need to make. The fact that we've lost them, it's been guys are searching. I'm searching as the coach, in terms of trying to get them over the finish line. And, I'll never put it on the player. I take the responsibility, even though I don't make the shots or miss the defensive assignments. It's still my job to get them over the hump.
Mike Woodson, always talking about that hump. Can never really seem to get over it. Look, my favorite thing in that clip of Mike Woodson talking about why this team can't win close games is where he's like, I'm going to take responsibility for the loss, but not really. It's actually on the players because they didn't make shots and they didn't defend very well. I love when people do that. It makes me laugh pretty much every single time. We're going to look back on this IU season and think about all the what ifs. And like, what if they'd won half of these close games? How different would things be? They hadn't lost to Northwestern on the road. Would they have made the tournament? Like seriously, like if they'd won half these games, is Mike Woodson still the head coach of IU next year? Maybe. Like seriously, like that's a legitimate possibility. If they beat Michigan and if they beat Purdue, if they don't, do whatever that was at the end of the Maryland game, like does he have a chance to be here next year? Probably, but I don't know, man. This team late in games has just not been very good. And usually when you're not good very late in games, it usually just kind of falls back on the head coach. Mike Woodson just hasn't been able to get him over that freaking hump. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, Jared Dubin of Last Night in Basketball.com. He's going to join the show. He covers the NBA incredibly well. Smart guy, knows a lot more than I do. That's why we have him on the show. We're going to talk about All-Star Weekend, and I promise this is not just going to be some thing where we both throw out a bajillion different ways to fix All-Star Weekend. That is not the goal of the interview, because you can find a million different ways to fix it just by going on Twitter, and that's not what I want to give you. I want to give you something authentic. So that's hopefully what the interview is going to be. Jared Dubin of Last Night in Basketball.com. When we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com. He joins the show. Jared, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing fine, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, it's just, it's my least favorite day of the year, Jared. It is National Let's Fix All-Star Weekend Day. And I just I feel like I've heard every theory, every idea on how to fix it. And I have my own, which we'll get into here in a second. And I think the frustrating thing about this year is I thought that the game was more competitive than it has been in years past. What did you think of the actual games that were played?
Yeah, I mean, the second game, at least, was pretty competitive. It's not like they weren't trying in the final game. It just wasn't. So that doesn't get the kind of drama that I guess people want in the games. But, in terms of the actual quality of the basketball, probably better than most recent seasons.
Yeah, Draymond Green, who is just, I love Dalton Connect after the game being like, it's Draymond Green. He's just talking. Did it bother you having the Rising Stars play in the actual all-star game?
No, who cares? Who cares? Maybe you want to go to 4 teams of all-stars instead of 3, and then you could just, that way you get more players in the game so you don't have the kind of snubs in the future. But I think the idea was getting the Rising Stars in there will get some of the guys to play harder because they don't want to lose to the young guys. And I think that at least kind of worked.
I felt like it did, for the first time, maybe ever, my wife, who doesn't care about basketball at all. We were sitting on the couch, we were watching the game, and we were both rooting for the Rising Stars. It's the first time in my life I think I've ever had a genuine rooting interest in the All-Star game. Seriously. It was good. It made it a little more enjoyable. And I was thinking about just kind of the NBA in general. And I don't think that, I think one of the problems, because, ratings have been a big discussion, and just in a nutshell, I think one of the issues is people don't have a genuine rooting interest in NBA teams. They root for players. And because players are in and out every night, people don't watch as much because of that. Do you think that the NBA has a rooting interest issue?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've thought about it that way before. I mean, I think even if you're a fan of a player, then you're at least going to watch that player's games, So I don't know that there's necessarily an issue there. Yeah, I mean, I have to think about it more, but it's not something that I had thought of previously. So I don't know. I feel like if it was a significant issue, it would have come up. I'm not saying no, but I just haven't thought about it personally.
Yeah, joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com. He writes fantastic stuff. You should go and check it out. Yeah, so I stumbled across that idea because I am a Mavericks fan, and it's because my favorite player growing up was Dirk. And because I rooted for Dirk, I rooted for the Mavs. It happened for 20 years. And so now I'm just a Mavs fan no matter what. And I found myself I don't care if Anthony Davis is going to play tonight. I'm going to watch because I'm a Mavs fan. Whereas when LeBron James retires, where are all those LeBron fans going to go? Is that going to hurt ratings more? That's kind of where the thought process comes from. What do you think is going to happen to ratings when LeBron eventually retires from the league?
I mean, I think you might see a similar period to what happened after Michael Jordan retired from the league. I don't think it's that dissimilar, and I think it might take, until somebody else comes up and sort of claims that mantle. I think the NBA is lucky that there are plenty of candidates to do that are still playing right now. Luka Doncic is now on LeBron's team. Can he be that guy? Victor Wembanyama is a guy that we've literally never seen before in our lives. Can he be someone that people sort of latch onto as, the future of the league? We've got all these incredible players on so many different teams. It's not like Jokic and Giannis and those guys are going anywhere. anytime soon either. So there are still going to be plenty of, superstars available to watch. Obviously, nobody on the level of LeBron James. That's basically impossible at this point. But there are plenty of people, sort of waiting in the wings to carry at least some of the ratings burden.
Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com. So speaking of LeBron James and Anthony Edwards, why is everyone upset at LeBron for sitting out of the All-Star game, but not Anthony Edwards?
I don't know, but I feel like they both should have said before the weekend, like, hey, I'm not playing. So that you could have gotten, like, Domas Sabonis and Norm Powell in there. I'm not someone that is super bothered by either one, but I do think it kind of sucks for the guys that could have gotten themselves into the game if they had just been upfront earlier.
Yeah, I agree, especially for a guy like Norman Powell, who's a really good player, probably going to win Most Improved Player. Maybe we'll see. I would have liked to have seen him play. Sabonis as well, especially since, like, I know Sacramento isn't Oakland or San Francisco, but like it's still kind of close. So it would have been cool to get a king in there. With the All-Star game, why do you think the NBA feels the need to do all of the extra stuff that they did, like the concert and the Mr. Beast shot?
I wish I knew, man. That to me is sort of the worst part of All-Star Weekend. Like, why do we have these, performances that take up, 30, 40% of the running time of All-Star Weekend? Why do we have these introductions that take 20 minutes for every event? Why do we have these interviews in between parts of the event? Like, why are dunk contest guys getting interviewed between rounds? Why are three-point shooting guys getting interviewed between rounds? Like, we don't need any of this. Let the shooters shoot, let the dunkers dunk, and then play a game on Sunday. And I feel like that's really all we need. I said the same thing, on Twitter the other day, and people were like, "Oh, well, how are they going to make money then?" Like, they're not making money by having Kevin Hart commentate. They're paying him to do that, most likely. Like, they're not making money off of that. They're not making money by having someone perform at All-Star Weekend. They're likely paying them to do that. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. It almost feels like the NBA doesn't trust their own product to be entertaining. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I think it's at least partially true. It's like, it's a very seemingly insecure league that is always talking about, changes and what needs to be done to fix things, when if they just focused on the actual quality of basketball, which is extremely high right now, and if they focused on actually telling people that, instead of having, their premiere studio show, everybody goes on TV twice a week and tells everybody how much the NBA stinks now because they don't post up like Shaq did in 1994, then, maybe things would be a little bit different.
I saw this idea the other day on Twitter, joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com. Someone said that they should have a TV show where they make basketball players that played in like the 80s and 90s go back and watch random games from the 80s and 90s and have them explain to us why basketball then is better than what we have now. I think that would be an incredible thing to watch. And then, I think it was Eddie Johnson who got really upset at that idea. But why do you think like that is a stance that people have? Like why do you think that people from the 80s and 90s think basketball was better than it is now?
I mean, I don't know if it's all of them. I think it, very much happens to be the ones that are on TV, which is a significant issue. I think for the inside the NBA guys, Shaq in particular, it is about glorifying Shaq. I think that some of it is that they very openly, like, they brag about not watching the games. So I don't know how they would know if this era of basketball is good or not. As far as other older guys, I mean, I think that there is a natural inclination to think that things were better years ago. I mean, you look at polls of people in all aspects of life, and they always think the world was better, 20, 25 years ago, which, normally coincides with like their childhood. And it's just people being nostalgic for what they had when they were growing up. I think that's a pretty significant part of it.
Yeah, it's really funny, because when you think back, you never think about all the things that sucked. That's just people tend to only remember the stuff that was good.
But even with the All-Star game, people are remembering like 2 or 3 All-Star games where it was really, really good basketball, and they're only remembering the games where it was like actually close in the fourth quarter and guys started playing defense. They're not remembering all the All-Star games that that sucked just as much as to pull one out of the air. I don't even remember if this one sucked, but 2019, go look back at a 1996 All-Star game, which was actually I was at the 1996 All-Star game. Now that I think about it, in Cleveland when I was a kid, I don't remember it being particularly super competitive. So
yeah, joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at Last Night in basketball.com. What do you think? What would you define as a successful All-Star game? What do you want to see for you to walk away and be like, you know what? I was glad that I watched that for, an hour or however long it is.
I don't think I'm the intended customer. Because, to me, a good basketball game is one where, I'm learning something about the teams or the players that's going to be useful information for me when I'm, watching the playoffs or watching the finals or things like that. And nothing that happens in an All-Star game is ever going to be useful on that level. I think some of the reason that people don't like it as much anymore is, we never used to see stars all on the same court at the same time before. There were no, 3 times or 5 times a week national TV games in, 1996. And now we see these guys on the court every night. If you have League Pass, you can watch every single star every night if you want to. It's not a novelty to have, LeBron James and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant on the court at the same time. They literally played against each other in the finals 3 times in a row. We're desensitized to seeing all these guys on the court together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, that's an excellent point. Do you think part of it as well is the style of play? And what I mean by that is a lot of players now are a little more finesse. There's a lot of three-point shooting, which isn't a bad thing per se, but there's less guys like Sean Kemp who would just kind of look to dunk on people. Do you think that has an impact on why people don't enjoy it as much as they used to?
Potentially. I mean, the things that people like seeing, the NBA has done studies on this. They like seeing in order, dunks and then threes are the things that they like to see the most. So that's kind of what you get in an All-Star game. You get a higher volume of threes, obviously, than you did in the past. But I don't see why it's a problem to shoot a 3 instead of an 18-footer, especially in an All-Star game. One is going to be significantly more entertaining than the other. I think some of the style of play stuff is just a function of the way you have to play to be in the NBA now. You can't be a power forward who, basically just gets offensive rebounds and isn't a threat to score outside, 10 feet from the basket. That kind of player just doesn't exist anymore because it would ruin the spacing of his team's offense. And the physicality that's demanded in today's game is much different than it used to be. It's now more about, agility and stamina and the ability to, change directions multiple times in quick succession and make multiple efforts, on defense or to get a rebound or to block a shot. It's about that rather than being able to stick your shoulder into a guy's chest to get a rebound. You still have to be able to stick your shoulder into a guy's chest if you want to create separation one-on-one. And there are plenty of players that are really good at that. It's just a little bit different than it was, obviously, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at Last Night in basketball.com, also covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com. So I've seen a lot of people blame Adam Silver for the deterioration of the interest in the All-Star game and in the regular season. How much of it do you think is on him versus the players?
I think that there is another interested party that is potentially even more to blame, and it's the teams, because they're the ones that have such significant long-term investments in the players that things like trying in the All-Star game are really, really bad for teams. What is the upside of playing, as hard as you can go in an All-Star game for an NBA team. There is none. Doesn't do anything for that team. Doesn't do anything for their hopes of competing in the playoffs or getting a better seed in the playoffs based on their performance in the regular season. And the investment in these guys is now so significant. Like, they're making more money than, some guys are making more money than the entire salary cap of the league was when I was growing up, So it's just a completely different scale of what they're invested in. And I think similarly, the contracts are now so big over the long term that they feel similarly about, a random regular season game on a Wednesday in March, because the upside is you win that one game, and the downside is potentially, you ruin that guy's long-term prospects with the team. I think there's obviously a balancing act that needs to be struck there. And I think the best way to do it is just to get rid of all back-to-backs. So you don't have these games where somebody is at such significant risk for an injury when it's, their fourth game in 5 nights on the road or something like that. Like, those kind of things should just never happen. But they're never going to reduce the number of games in the season. So that's always going to be an issue. To me, it's just start the season 2 weeks earlier and eliminate all back-to-backs. But I don't know if we're ever going to get that either.
Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at Last Night in Basketball.com. Last thing for you, Jared, and I'll let you go. What seems like the most reasonable solution to fixing All-Star Weekend?
Fixing it how, I guess, is the question that I would ask there.
In terms of let's focus on the All-Star game itself, because I think a lot of the 3-point contest being fun to watch is very reliant on guys actually posting scores that are similar. The dunk contest is, I don't know, it feels kind of played out. But the All-Star game itself, what seems like the most reasonable way to make that a little more entertaining for people?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just to make it about the actual basketball on the court rather than all of the sideshows. But I'm not the intended customer for the All-Star game, so I may not be the most reliable person to ask here.
Fair enough. Really, I mean, you just seem like the kind of guy that likes watching Steph Curry pull up from half court.
Yeah, I mean, if he makes it, I think that's pretty cool. It doesn't bother me if he misses it, especially in an All-Star game setting. Just see guys trying cool stuff. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, who cares? The game doesn't count anyway. To me, the biggest solution is if you don't like the All-Star game, don't watch it.
That makes sense. That's the best response I've gotten to that question yet, Jared. And it's really interesting. I feel like people watch things that they don't like in sports all the time. And it's honestly fascinating.
I mean, I'm still here after, 30 plus years watching Dallas Cowboys games. So I know what that is all about.
That's funny. Oh man. When are they going to extend Parsons?
Oh God, who knows? If they were a team that knew what they were doing, they would have done it last year. But they're not a team that knows what they're doing, and they would legitimately rather have speculation through all of training camp about his contract than they would, sign him early and be able to put together a better team. That matters more to them.
It does. The winner of the media Super Bowl every year is the Cowboys.
Yeah, and that's the one they care about, not the one that you actually get a trophy and whatnot for. So I don't see things changing there anytime soon.
I don't either. Jared, thanks for your time as always, man. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep, that is Jared Dubin. You can check out his NBA writing over at Last Night in Basketball.com. He also covers the NFL for CBS, so you can read his stuff at CBSSports.com as drafts happen and the Cowboys eventually figure their stuff out. And as the Colts eventually figure out who's going to play quarterback, Jared Dubin is the guy to check out for all of that. Speaking of the Colts, Top 10 Tuesday, the 10 best prospects for the Colts to take at 14 is coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice week. Hopefully you had a long weekend. If you didn't, I'm sorry. Feel bad for you. Anyway, John Buzzard chiming in on Twitter over the break, talking about the difference between, 90s basketball and, what we have today in the NBA. And I think Buzzard makes a couple really good points, as he normally does. If you want to tweet at me during the show, __ Jonathan Smith, if you can tweet at me there. John Buzzard chiming in saying that the 90s had differentiating styles, also saying that the 90s styles was better. I don't know if I would agree with that. 20s, there's much more ball movement, which is a better thing. I would agree. 90s had known commodities. Players we watched in college and knew going in, and players stayed on the same teams. I think that's incredibly important. And then the 90s had true heroes and villains that added to rivalries. I don't know. I don't know if the style was better. Like, sorry, I don't miss, watching fill in the blank player post up for 16 seconds while everyone just kind of stands around and watches. I feel like the game's a little more connected now, which kind of feeds into the ball movement side of things. And so I don't know if I necessarily agree with the styles better. Anyway, top 10 Tuesday, the 10 best prospects for the Colts to take at 14. Let's just jump right into it. Number 10, Luther Burden III. He's a wide receiver out of Missouri. If the Colts took a wide receiver, I wouldn't hate it. I'd be a little bit annoyed, though, because it would feel like they were giving up on a guy in A.D. Mitchell who they just spent a second-round draft pick on, okay? Like, give him one more year. Let's see if he figures it out. And if he does, then, you save that first-round pick and you were able to use it on something that matters a little bit more. With that being said, this Luther Burden kid can flat-out fly, and I will never be upset with Chris Ballard for taking a guy who can flat-out fly. Number 9. Colston Loveland, the best tight end in the NFL draft that no one really seems to care about because everyone's so enamored with Tyler Warren because they saw him go off against SMU, okay, and Boise State, okay? But there are some people out there that actually have Loveland ranked ahead of Warren on their big board, okay? Colston Loveland's a little closer to Travis Kelce. Warren's a little more like George Kittle. Warren a little more physical, big, just going to kind of out-physical people to make plays, whereas Colston Loveland, a little more finesse, okay, is going to get open via route running and those types of things. Either way, if the Colts wind up taking Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren, I think it's a great pick one way or the other. Number 8, in terms of the top 10 options that the Colts could take with their first-round pick, currently sitting at number 14. I think that there's a world, it would be a miracle, but I do think that there's a world where Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward drop. We've heard a lot about how underwhelming this quarterback class is. Maybe the Browns, the Titans, whoever don't see, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward fit as a potential, high-end draft pick. Maybe they sleep to the middle part of the first round. Maybe the Colts are able to grab one of them. We'll see. I think it's a pretty long shot for it to happen, but we'll have to wait and see. Number 7, Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State. Big beast at Ohio State. Okay, I'd like to have him higher on the list. The issue is he just tore his ACL. Now, while ACL tears aren't as big of a deal as they were, a decade ago, it's still concerning when a person who walks around at 300 pounds has knee issues at the age of 22. It just is. So I'd like to have him higher. Great player, great talent. The issue is he just tore his ACL, and I don't really like that. Number 6, Will Johnson. There are very few players in this draft that I would be in favor of the Colts trading up to pick. Will Johnson is one of them. Okay, he could be higher on the list, but it would take the Colts a fairly decent amount of stuff to trade up and grab this guy. He's a good player. Okay, but I do think that there's another corner that they could take at 14. Okay, but this guy is a Chris Ballard fit. He fits the Chris Ballard mold. He's 6'2", 210 pounds or whatever. Big, tall, long. Like that is what Will Johnson is, and that is what Chris Ballard looks for in his corners. Of all the positions that the Colts need to address, cornerback is probably at the top. Okay, so would love it if they were to make a trade up to grab this guy. That being said, I don't think Chris Ballard's going to do that because he's a pansy and he never trades up. So they'll probably end up wanting to have someone, they'll end up having to take a different player at 14. If it is a corner, I hope it's Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. Colts need help at corner. It is no secret. Okay, you know, Womack and Jones played hard this year, but like those can't consistently be your cornerbacks. This Jahdae Barron kid won the Thorpe Award this year, which is given to the best cornerback in all of college football. The dude can flat out play. He's physical. He's willing to tackle. He's won a lot of games. That's the one thing that you'll notice about this list is it's nothing but guys that won a lot because the Colts need guys in that building who expect to win. And that is what Jahdae Barron does. Like the last 2 years, making it to the college football playoff, at Texas. The Colts need guys like that. And this Jahdae Barron dude can just, he can play. Like we have 2 years worth of stuff to go back and look at and be like, yeah, this guy's really good. 2 years ago, he was all conference. This year, he wins the freaking Thorpe Award. So the dude can play. He's only 5'11", 200 pounds, which isn't quite as big as Chris Ballard wants, but I don't care. Just go get a dude who can actually play football at a high level. Number 4, his teammate, Kelvin Banks, an offensive tackle out of Texas. At some point, the Colts are going to have to start readdressing the offensive line because outside of Quentin Nelson, who's a little older and is only getting older, they don't have any great offensive linemen. They need to, at a minimum, add some depth, and Kelvin Banks does that. He's been a good player at Texas for the last 2 years, and the Colts have older offensive tackles. Bernard Raymond's 27. Braden Smith's 28. Okay, the Colts have to start shoring up that offensive line at some point. They, at a minimum, need depth, and bringing in a guy like Kelvin Banks, who's going to compete to start, I think would be a great place for them to, start the rebuilding process of this offensive line. That is the guy. I think he'd be a great selection at number 14 for the Indianapolis Colts. Number 3, Mikael Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia. Okay, now the Colts may have to trade up a couple spots to grab this guy. He's either the second or third best edge rusher in this draft class, depending on who you read and what you prefer. Number 1 is the Abdul Carter kid out of Penn State. Number 2 and 3 are Mikael Williams or James Pierce Jr., an edge out of Tennessee. I know Colts fans. I know you don't want to see Chris Ballard take another edge rusher in the first round, but it's an important position. The Eagles just won a Super Bowl because of their pass rush and because they had these amazing guys coming off the edge. Now, the Colts aren't close to that, but if Laiatu Latu develops and Mikael Williams is as good as advertised, then the Colts could be on their way to having a defensive line that actually disrupts the game here in the next couple of years. Maybe by the time that happens, they'll have figured out who's actually going to play quarterback for them for longer than a 3-year span. Okay, Mikael Williams, if he's available at 14, would be an excellent pick for Chris Ballard and the Colts. Number 2, Tyler Warren, the guy that every Colts fan seems to want. And the Colts desperately need a tight end. No matter who's playing quarterback for the Colts next year, they need a player who can consistently create mismatches. That's what Tyler Warren does. It's the whole too big for defensive backs, too fast for linebackers, except he's also bigger than most linebackers. The dude's, 6'6", 250 or whatever he is. He's physical. So I think at a minimum, he's going to be an average blocker. Like he seems like an obvious selection. A lot of people have him as tight end 1 for this season. Okay, I think just about every Colts fan would like to see Tyler Warren in Indianapolis because he's a great player, which is true. That's not why I want him. I want him because he's physical, and I think that sets a tone. Like how many physical players, how many physical skill position players do the Colts have on their offense? I don't think they have any. Like Anthony Richardson doesn't really come across as physical. Josh Downs isn't. A.D. Mitchell isn't. Alec Pierce isn't. Michael Pittman Jr. isn't. Jonathan Taylor, not really. He just comes across as a nice guy. Like they need some nasty. And I think Tyler Warren would give them some of that. Okay, the reason why I don't have him number 1 on the list is because the Colts could find a really good tight end in the second round. There's a lot of really good ones this year. Number 1, for Top 10 Tuesday, the 10 best prospects for the Colts to take with the 14th overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. It's like a little over two months away. Number 1 is Malachi Starks, a safety out of Georgia. He's the best safety in the NFL draft. Okay? He might be the best player in the NFL draft. And you're saying, well, Jonathan, if he's the best player in the NFL draft, then why in the world would he be available at 14? And the answer is because he doesn't play a premium position. But the Colts desperately need a safety. Julian Blackmon does not need to come back for another season. Malachi Starks fills that safety role immediately. Okay, and he's versatile. He can cover. He can come up and fill the run game. He can play cornerback if you need him to. If Kenny Moore gets hurt, he could play that nickel corner spot. Okay, like he can do whatever you need him to do on the back end of their defense. And he has the potential to be a legitimately great player. The Colts haven't had just a legitimately great player in forever, since Andrew Luck. Like, Andrew Luck was a great player when he was here. Who's been great since? They've had some good players. You know, DeForest Buckner's a good player. Jonathan Taylor's a good player. Michael Pittman Jr. is a good player. When was the last time they had someone that was legitimately great? Quentin Nelson. Okay, give me another one. You can't. They need a little bit of great in that locker room. They need some toughness. They need some physicality. And I think Malachi Starks brings all three of those things into that locker room immediately. And he'd be able to make a day one impact, which is what Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen both need because they're trying to keep their jobs. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune into the real Jonathan Smith Show. I greatly appreciate it. The Dan Dockett Show is coming your way. He's on from noon to 3. Coach Izzo at 12:30. Todd Leary at 1 o'clock. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon, as always, firing off takes, talking about Purdue's game tonight against Michigan State. Tomorrow's show is going to be great. It's Over the Hump Day, sponsored or brought to you by Mike Woodson's never-ending pursuit of getting over the hump. You don't want to miss that. That is tomorrow, 10 to noon, right here on Indy's Sports Ticket. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 4.5 minutes.